Hi everybody and welcome to The Curious Geographer. If you haven't already, have a look at the lovely poster of everything that's coming up this term. But today I'm super excited that we are joined by Roots, but more specifically we're joined by Dr Cyrus Nayeri, who's going to tell us a little bit about what Roots is, how you can publish your work, which is really exciting, particularly being kind of A Level students, and it's for undergraduate students as well, and how that can maybe help you stand out on your UCAS applications and just kind of like really stand out from the crowd. So it's an amazing opportunity. I can't wait to find out more. I'm just going to hand over to Dr Cyrus Nayeri, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what is Roots.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Ellie, for organising this. I'm delighted to be on, and I can see you've got some amazing speakers. So I'm very much looking forward to watching and delighted to be here. My name's Dr Cyrus Nayeri. I'm Head of Geography at Dulwich College in London. I'm also the visiting tutor for the Geography PGCE course at King's College London. Yeah, that's me.
And what exactly is Roots for everybody watching?
So Roots is a journal, an academic journal, which is specifically designed for sixth formers and undergraduate geography students. What makes Roots so different is that we're not a blog and we're not a newspaper. We're a journal which is for students' work. So a journal is different from those two forms of kind of output because it's peer reviewed. So when you submit your work to Roots, it means that it's been looked at and you've got feedback from two experts in the geography community. So academics or teachers with a high level of expertise will review your work, provide you with comments, and it will go through a process of checking, which means that when you come to read an article or when others come to read your work, they know that it has a certain level of credibility, and that you know that if your work's got any errors in it, that can be ironed out. So Roots is a peer-reviewed academic journal, and that's what peer review means. It's reviewed, in this case, not by your peers, because those would be people the same age, but by reviewers who are experts. So Roots is absolutely free, which is very different from many other kinds of journals. Normally, you will have seen, if you're trying to research for your work, that a lot of academic research is behind paywalls, so you have to be part of a university to see it. The great thing about Roots is you can read other people's work for free. So if you're a sixth former, you can read what an undergraduate has written and see, wow, okay, well, that's the standard that I will be working at if I study geography, without having to pay a single thing. And you can submit your work for free, which is also amazing. So you get all of this amazing feedback, and we pride ourselves on really supporting you as much as possible. And that's, of course, all for free, which with a regular journal, as I said, is not part of the way it works. We publish work in human geography and physical geography, and we really want to be a journal for the discipline as a whole and what comes on the edges.
Brilliant. So just to confirm, you talked about kind of peer review. So not a student, but did you say an academic? Who exactly does that peer reviewing again? I know you mentioned it before, but just to confirm.
So when you submit your work, which you can submit your work at any time, it's not a competition, so we don't have deadlines. Your work is allocated by us on our side to an academic who's an expert in the field that you're writing about. So let's say you're really interested in cultural geography, and you've even written something specific in cultural geography. Maybe it's about experiences of moving around a city, for example. We have academics who are at the cutting edge of that research, and that's not to intimidate you, that's because they're amazing and they want to help students, and that your work will go to them. and they will give you the comments. So those are the reviewers that we're talking about. There's also an editor who's responsible for sort of managing your submission. So these are all things on our side, really, that you don't need to worry about too much. But there are multiple layers of people who look at your work and provide you with supportive, constructive, helpful feedback.
That's amazing, and it's amazing that it's free as well, as you said, because I know that my students, when they're looking for their NEA or coursework, it's really difficult because they can't read lots of articles. So actually that it's free to submit, and they get reviewed as well, and it's all up on your website for them to see. So really fantastic for students to get involved in. But what kind of submissions do you accept? Is it just essays? Like, what do you get?
So Roots was really born out of the fact that I had students just like you, Ellie, who produced amazing work for NEAs and some truly outstanding pieces of work, but there was nowhere really for them to submit it. Ultimately, they got a grade and it was sort of put in a drawer, and that was it. And I felt really sorry for some of my students, because actually what they needed was a chance to show that to the world, and to get some credit for it, and also to see if it could be made better in any way. So Roots really was for my students specifically, and others like them, who who wanted to publish their work. So you can publish more traditional pieces. So you can publish part of your NEA or your dissertation if you're an undergraduate. Everything has to be under 2,000 words. So it might just be that you write up the key ideas, and that might be your introduction, your methodology, your literature review, and then your conclusions. It could just be a literature review, but it has to be under 2,000 words. With NEAs, we also only just kind of want you to submit it first to school, wait until the whole submission cycle of that assessed piece of work is complete, and then submit it to Roots. And that's important because that's part of the JCQ, who are the sort of exam board guidance people. That's their guidance. You can submit an essay that you write for school or university, maybe on one of your weekly essays. You can submit a book or a film review, which is a great way of getting into Roots, especially if you don't want to write something really long. You can just write something quite short, but quite hopefully quite in depth. You could submit an academic poster, and there's some guidance on the website about what an academic poster looks like. You could submit a commentary about your lived experience or a perspective piece. You could submit some poetry or a photo essay. Now, one of the things you'll see if you look at existing pieces of work on Roots is that they are referenced. So we know if you're a sixth former, you won't have the same access to academic research as you will if you're an undergraduate. But there are still ways you can reference. You could use Google Scholar, or you could use reports or other kinds of information. So this is where Roots is. When I said academic, it means that you are backing up your points with research as much as possible. And you can see how others have done that. But you can submit a wide variety of things, and we really would encourage those different types of submissions, those poetry or posters, because maybe they fit better with what you're trying to say and communicate.
Brilliant. What are some of the, I mean, it sounds like there's so many kind of ways that students can get involved. Would you mind giving us some examples of what contributions you have enjoyed reading, or have like stood out for you?
That's a great question. I think one of the things we all love about geography and our subject is how diverse it is. And that's what Roots is about. It's about the physical and the human, and we have expert reviewers from both. So I've loved reading about island biogeography, and some of those really wonderful physical geography pieces. But for me, what makes Roots stand out is because of its values, it's become a place where students feel they can write a lot more about the relevance of equality and diversity in geography. And actually, that's not a given. Actually, the fact that Roots does and has accumulated writing of that nature shows that students understand that you can write lots of different things and you can push the boundaries. So a few of my favourite pieces have been one by Eva Mills Thomas and Oliver Norman on the way that LGBTQ plus people have been affected by the pandemic. So both of those two are students at Cambridge doing geography, and they wrote that based on based on the pandemic, and I thought it was a really lovely kind of relevant, interesting twist on an equality and diversity theme meshed with the pandemic, meshed with the concept of inequality. And I think that's what Roots does. It brings together kind of some kind of empirical work, so usually some kind of observation of data or findings with some kind of theory. And if you don't feel that your work is quite there yet, and you could do better, then my advice is make your work as good as it can be. Speak to your teacher, speak to others around you, and really polish your work so it's your very best. Then send it to Roots via our website, and then we can make it even that bit better. But the more you do in advance, so rather than just sending an essay that's got some feedback from a teacher, redraft it and draft it again in school or at university, and then when you're ready, send it to us. That's my advice. But wonderful pieces by Eva and Oliver. We've also had a great piece by Mary Jane Farrell on intersectionality. We've had pieces on period poverty. We've had pieces on incarceration, mosques in Malaysia. Just some wonderful, rich ideas that show that geography is just more than the specification if you're in sixth former, or more than a kind of key set of physical geography ideas. I think if you read Roots, you'll see how wonderful and broad the discipline is and how much students are interested in the different areas.
Brilliant. And we've got a few questions coming in, so I might kind of feed them into our chat as well. But I think you're kind of right in what's saying is that they're so diverse, and hopefully when students kind of get to A level, they start to realise that it's not just like urbanisation and individual topics. As you learn, you can be interested in so many different things. So one interest I had when I was at university was looking at graffiti and art and things like that, and how that links to geography and space. So one way of kind of finding ideas is just think about what interests you, and some of the interesting titles you said about kind of period poverty and intersectionality. It doesn't have to be just those geography subjects that you think are what make up geography. Really kind of take your interests and kind of go with it. I think that's kind of what you were kind of saying. On to kind of one question kind of about like the process from we have got Ikra, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, saying how long does the whole submission peer review take kind of process to publish? Obviously you have that kind of bit before, as you were saying, like getting your teacher to look at it and feedback, but kind of when a student kind of submits it to Roots, what would you maybe expect?
That's a great question. We try and be as fast and efficient as possible. Sometimes in the real world, journals can take years to publish. We aim for the timeline really depends on how much work your piece requires. If you have a lot of edits, it might mean that you have to spend longer editing it. But typically, it could be as little as 4 months, and it could be as long as half a year, maybe more. And that depends on how quickly you are at making edits, because every piece will have some edits to make, and that's part of our philosophy of helping you become the best geographer you can be. It will depend on when you submit it precisely, because we process our submissions in batches. So if you submit it close to the time when we process it, then it will get processed, and that gap between submission and being processed is shorter. It will depend on factors such as if we have a slot in a publication, we have 3 issues a year. These are digital issues, so there's no paper, but we still have 3 of them in September, in January, and in April, so sort of Easter, Christmas, and start of the academic year. So it depends on those things, but generally we can be quite quick. We're quick at processing it if the piece itself can be, if you can work on it quite quickly too.
Brilliant. And I'm going to link to a question from Oliver saying, Roots really interests me, but I sometimes hesitate in finding an essay title. Loosely researching an area of human geography, but what advice can you offer to help giving an interesting title? So that was one of the questions I was going to ask you as well. So if students want to really submit something, What advice do you give if a topic doesn't instantly come to mind and they don't know where to start?
That's a really good question, and I think it is one that we all face. It's not only if you're an undergraduate or a sixth former. Everybody wonders, what's the even after you write something, you think, well, what's the real focus of that? What's the key message? I would just take you back to write something that you're interested in. If you don't really have a particular thought in mind, do a mind map and just see, okay, these are the themes. Maybe you want to write about your lived experience. So maybe you can think about what makes maybe your perspective on the world interesting, and then think about what aspect of geography you might use to kind of help you explain that or analyze it. You might want to think about, there's this interesting word in A Level geography, which is synopticity. Where are the interesting boundaries between different parts of the course maybe that really aren't explained? Some really interesting work on routes about early warning systems and hazards. And that's something most units at A Level go into a little bit, but this particular author really went into depth and found out what's the latest thinking and how does it apply to Mexico. So, it does take time, is what I'm saying, and there isn't an overnight process, but kind of just give yourself that time. Maybe keep thinking about it over a week or 2 or 3 or a month, but also don't worry too much about it. We kind of help you if you put pen to paper, have a go, and then the great thing about sending it to us is our editors and our reviewers can help you find the grain of originality or what's really good about it. And we'll say, okay, well, that idea, just those couple of sentences are the best thing. I would suggest that you rewrite it or make some edits based on making this much more important. So that's where we really add to your learning because of that expertise that the body of reviewers brings.
Brilliant. And it does seem that students can write about so much, whether it is kind of like, as I said, based in Mexico, or the kind of geography of the everyday. Like geographers research kind of skateboards and kind of skateboarding communities and things like that, but it could be something really diverse. So yeah, just mind map, as Sarah said, and anything that interests you. I'm sure something will come to mind once you've kind of thought about it for a couple of days or a week. On that, you talked about the word synopticity. Dylan has said, what is your policy, but I think maybe what is your view on intersectional research, so e.g. politics and geography? So if students interested in politics and geography, can they write something on that?
And that's a really good question, because if you're thinking of applying to university for several courses, you could write something for routes that speaks to those two topics. You can. Absolutely, and that's where interesting ideas are, but principally routes is about geography. So when the reviewers are looking at your work, they're thinking, okay, has this person sort of thought about this through a geographical lens? And if you read the articles online, you'll get a feel for what that looks like. But things like you'll learn about when you're learning A-level geography mean that it's not just content. So something could be geographical because it's thinking about place or people or the environment, climate change, but often geography is about the kind of way you see something. So it might be around thinking about different scales, or it might be around a concept like inequality, or it might be around how things differ in different spaces. It might be around a critique, which is kind of a geographical way of thinking, isn't it, about the way the world works. Politics itself is interesting because there's politics and government and politics, but there's also politics, which is around how can the world be made differently, and whose ideas come to shape the world that we live in. So if that's your interest, I would just try and think, if you can think, how can you apply those ideas in a really creative way to think who's deciding, and that might be around agricultural change at the moment and the changes that are happening to the Common Agricultural Policy, or its modern manifestation, or who's making the decisions is a political one, and think creatively about what those intersections look like. But yeah, geography is the focus.
So we've talked about kind of how to get ideas. What happens if I have a really great idea, but I'm not strong in essay writing? you have talked about there's different ways that people can kind of submit photo essays or many different submissions, and you have an amazing video on your website. But what support, you offer support from Roots, so kind of what kind of tips or advice do you give in terms of essay writing or submitting other creative pieces of work?
I think that's absolutely right. If you look on our website, we've tried our very best, as we've seen common threads in student work, to pick up on those and help you as much as possible. So if you go to our website, there's some guidance on how to reference. There's some guidance on how to reference as a sixth former and how you can make the most of the references and the information you have. There's some guidance on how to write a book review. There's some guidance on essay writing. So we've tried to give some guides. But like all of these things, essay writing takes a huge amount of time to develop your own style. And I think writing for Roots is one way that you might feel more comfortable and confident in developing your style. No one's ever finished in their writing, and we're all in the process of learning. And I think if you feel that you are a little bit uncertain about your style, then just give it a go. Write something and then redraft it. That's the way it works. Lots of times the first draft isn't great. And I think that's kind of part of what we do in the work that we're doing with Roots, is redrafting and changing ideas and is part of the writing process. So please don't feel in any way disadvantaged. It's just normal. Have a go and speak to your teacher, speak to others around you, get your work proofread by a parent or a friend. And have a look at the amazing articles on Roots now. You know, we're over a year old and we've got some brilliant pieces there. The way you can learn how to write really well, really quickly, is have a look at the way others have written. Look at the style, look at how they reference, look at how they organize their ideas, look at how they use subheadings. And you've got a brilliant archive now of material to look at. So spend some time reading and seeing how that moves you forward.
There are some more questions, so I will get to them as we go through. So if you have written one, it's coming. And if you want another, if you haven't asked a question, or if you have a question, then please do write it down in the chat. So you kind of directed them to your amazing website, which has got so many useful resources for students. How can teachers use Roots in the classroom to support students for A-level teaching?
That's a really open question for teachers, and we'd love to hear how teachers are using Roots a lot more, because I don't think there is a single way of that teachers are doing it. So if you are a teacher and you are thinking of using it, or you have used it, then please do get in touch with us. You know, ultimately Roots is a source of up-to-date, interesting, student-written research that we think is a really, really useful classroom resource. So you could use it when you're talking about a particular theme, print off for students an article, and help students navigate how to read properly. And you could help students sort of, it's almost like a way into the more complex academic journals that academics write. It's almost like a stepping stone. So you could help introduce academic writing within lessons. You could also get students to critique it. So just because it's written in Roots doesn't mean that it's not one person's perspective. And you can get students to analyze it and say, what do they agree with? What do they disagree with? You could use it to prompt a debate or a discussion. You could use it as part of an extension class or an Oxbridge class. We don't just want students who are applying for Oxford and Cambridge to write for Roots. We think Roots is for everybody. State school, private school, really those students who are applying to universities for geography or not. It's for everybody. But in terms of the way teachers can use it, I think we have some really wonderful resources written by Dr. Dan Whittle for teachers as well. But I think that's an ongoing conversation that I would love to have with the teaching community about how there's innovative ways of doing it.
Brilliant. Well, I will aim to use it in my teaching, and I can pass that on back to you. My question kind of on this, we talked about how students can submit some of their NEA after they've kind of published it through the exam process. Can students use articles from Roots in their literature review for their NEA?
Of course.
Great. So if there's something that they think that's interesting, they can cite it like a normal kind of reference. And that's one way of also seeing really good academic writing on topics that's interesting, that links to their topics without having to go through all these kind of paywalls as well.
Absolutely. And as we build up more and more of these resources, often students will be helping themselves because, in a sense, someone might have written about an NEA on coasts, and then there's common themes that will come up. So absolutely, and you can see a citation on every single piece of work that you can simply copy or make into the citation that your style that you're using for your NEA, but absolutely use the research. Yeah.
Brilliant. And so that's like a really good thing for everybody watching, that even if you're not quite there or you don't think you're quite ready to publish, definitely still go on and look at what Roots has online. It might help you with your NEA, it can help you thinking about critical views about different topics as well. So definitely go check out the editions that are out. You did mention universities, and we haven't talked about this yet. It's not just for Oxbridge candidates, as you said, but if we're talking about UCAS, why is it good if a student has kind of gone through the Roots process? Like, how can that help with UCAS applications?
In my view, it's really difficult to stand out in a UCAS application because as a 18-year-old, there's only so many things you can do to show your academic excellence in the subject. Most of that is based around, it might be some charity work, or it might be you've written for an essay competition, or it might be you are part of a geography society at school. And it tends to be that if you love geography, you'll probably be involved in one of those things. It's really quite hard to get work experience in something geographical or something meaningful. So some people might have a tiny bit of that, but often not usually. So Roots is great because you can read something in Roots and you can write about it in your personal statement. So even if you don't want to submit, have a look at one of the articles and reflect on it and comment on what you agree with or disagree, or how it shaped your thinking about the world. Often people write about the same books in personal statements, those are the kind of common books that become very popular in geography, Factfulness or Prisoners of Geography, and they're all really important books. But there is a whole diversity of literature which shows that you're interested in the differences that exist. So go and have a read. It's 2,000 words. It won't take you more than an evening. Comment on it. See what you think about it in your personal statement. And those of you who submit to Roots, and get your work published, hopefully, if it gets to the end point, which most people do, and we really encourage that, then you can write about it in your personal statement. So I've submitted a piece of work to Root on this, or I've had my work published. And just to say that, I mean, that's not a normal thing, to be honest with you. Most people who publish work tend to be a bit further along in their academic careers. So to have a student publishing work who's a sixth former or an undergraduate is an amazing thing. It's absolutely path-breaking. It means that you as a student finally have an outlet to say something to the world in a way that shows that it is accurate and it has legitimacy. So don't write for Roots just for your personal statements. Write because you love geography and you want to improve in how you become a geographer. But it's also your voice, and it's also part of one thing you can write about and should write about in your UCAS form, because it's academic and it makes you stand out.
Brilliant. And I really like how we've talked about not only is Roots about publishing work, but also that massive resource. So it really is kind of relevant for all geography students. Hopefully we've encouraged people to publish work, and it doesn't have to be essays, as you said as well, or something they're interested in, but definitely everybody can get engaged with the platform. You just to confirm the question, and if anybody else does have a final question, we're kind of coming towards the end ish. Just to confirm, what exactly is your category because of students publishing? Because we do have someone who has just asked, they're a spatial analysis specialist. As a professional, can they publish? But maybe they could get involved another way. I'm not sure.
I mean, that's Roots is for sixth formers, so current sixth formers, year 12 and 13. It's for undergraduates in their first, second, third, or fourth years, or if they're 1 year after. So often you might do a dissertation and then write about it after your course has ended, but it's not for professional geographers. No. If you are a professional geographer, we do have occasional special issues. We have one coming out in January, which is for teachers. So teachers who have research, who want to show that, we have it occasionally. But you might much rather be welcome to become a peer reviewer or a reviewer, and share your expertise by helping students in the publication process.
Brilliant, thank you. Is there anything else you would like to share about Roots before? Because we always ask our guests, how did they end up on their career path? Because I know that you have done a PhD as you're a doctor, and obviously you've set up this, and you've a head of department. Is there anything else we'd like to finally add about Roots or getting students involved?
Roots is a resource for the geography community. It's for you as students. It's designed to bring out the best in you, and it's also designed to support you. We are a group of teachers and academics who run Roots. It's not and we really do this because we want to support the next generation of geographers. That's our motivation. So it's a completely voluntary project from our side, and it's developed so that it helps us help you, essentially. We're completely independent. We're not part of the RGS, although we do publish some of the work from the Young Geographer of the Year competition, which means that we can that we can be completely independent in what we do. So the key thing about Roots is our values are about publishing your work, helping you, supporting you, giving you constructive feedback, giving you a good experience of publishing, publishing a broad variety of work. And you are most welcome to write for us. You're most welcome to submit your work. You're most welcome to give it a go. You're most welcome to take part. And all of those barriers which around cost or around worry, please don't worry about. Submit your work and be proud of what you've done. In terms of my trajectory, I believe strongly in, when I was an undergraduate, I was more of a physical geographer. In my master's and my PhD, I was much more of a human geographer. My research focused on the way that communities in Iceland live with volcanic hazards. So typically a very sort of physical geography topic, but I approached from a cultural or human geography lens, where I looked at, well, why is it we tend to be really fixated on the big and the spectacular kinds of hazards, and how do people really live in the everyday? So I did ethnographic research with communities in Iceland and looked at how they live with the kinds of hazards that we don't tend to hear about or know about because they just live with them. That's a bit of a kind of a brief roundup. And then before I was in my research, my PhD, I was a teacher, and I continued to teach all the way through. So I have a really kind of a bit of a different path into teaching, but one that I really enjoy.
And then finally, this whole thing has pretty much been on advice for students getting their kind of work out there and being involved with Roots. But you also obviously teach A Level students as well. What advice do you have for students currently to kind of on their next steps, whether they're interested in a geography degree? Do you have any kind of top tips for the kind of A Level year?
Obviously those year 13s have had their education really quite disrupted, and fieldwork has been cancelled, and it's been a really odd kind of couple of years. I think one thing to just bear in mind is that be bold and be brave about what geography is, because there's a whole world of interesting work out there that might speak to you in some way. There'll be a geographer working on it, and geography is much broader than simply the syllabus. Yes, you have to write about key things and do that exam technique work, but actually, does it always prepare you as well for university and knowing what's beyond it? Does it really excite you? This is where Roots comes in, where you should just be free to think about what's geographical, push the boundaries of the subject, because you'll be working on some of this stuff when you progress in your academic career. So do what you find the area you love, and my advice is don't worry too much about go beyond the syllabus, read and enjoy reading something different.
Brilliant.
That would be my advice.
Thank you so much, Cyrus, for taking your time to speak to us through Roots, and hopefully it will encourage lots of students to get involved, go on the website and hopefully publish some of your work. So the best way, all the details are on the website for Roots in terms of contacting as well. So I'm just going to just put the link in the chat as well, just so that everybody has it. But it is copied at the bottom of the description of the YouTube page. But just so everybody can click on it immediately and go and have a look, it is on there now. And so for me, thank you very much from everybody at the Curious Geographer for being involved, and hopefully that you'll get lots of submissions. And just to let everybody know, for not next week. Oh no, not after half term. We are going to be going globally. This has been a rescheduling one, but it's all steam ahead. Talk to Dr. Robbie Parks and Professor Ulrich about Cape Town's water insecurity. If anybody's learning about resource security, then that links massively to it. GCSE as well. So we're going to be talking about day zero and how is Cape Town managing with their water insecurity and what that means to the local people. So it should be super, super interesting. And please join me then in a couple of weeks' time, and hope you guys all have a nice bit of a restful half term as well. If you've got any other questions, we'll write them in the chat. But that's everything from me this week.